indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated.
Thank you, Steve. We'll now move to our communications portion, and we'll start with the city manager reports.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. I would like to let you know that on March 23rd, I was advised by the Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District that the governor has selected Lyle Summers to replace Chad Nichols as the representative at the Conservancy District. I have been asked by a fellow council member to identify all of the other members. I will work on that, and I will share it with the rest of the council as soon as I identify all the other members. The other item that I would like to let you know about, I learned today from Mr. Langford that Midvale has approved a project just on the other side of the river that will have a significant impact along that frontage. They have agreed to allow Wasatch Residential Group to put 806 units on 40 acres. That's going to have some impact. So I just thought the citizens should know that was not something this city had any authority to either grant or object to. That all occurred in the city of Midvale. But people will wonder why we didn't say something. It's because it's not our jurisdiction. Besides that, we're moving forward with lots of interviews. And tonight in the closed session, I'll be sharing with you one potential hire that I'd like to discuss in greater detail in that setting. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one thing I'd like to point out. Ed Bergovich, one of our prosecutors, had oral arguments today up at the Court of Appeals and had the opportunity to argue there before the Court of Appeals. And it appears the arguments went great and he did a really good job. And we'll have to now wait 8-9 months to a year for the decision from the Court of Appeals. I just wanted to let you guys know that happened.
Thank you. Come over here to Scott.
If I could just add to what Mr. Brickey indicated with the Midvale development, it's across the river, right on 7800 South. So if you're driving east, it's right there on the right-hand side, that big vacant field. So just more density there. They wanted to capitalize on the track station, and hopefully they'll come over and shop in Gardner Village. Thanks. That's all I have.
Thank you. Dave?
Just one item tonight, just a reminder that the Easter egg hunt is this Saturday up at our soccer complex. It starts at 9 a.m. and there'll be 25,000 eggs for everybody to go get and enjoy. Last year we had approximately 2,000 people attend that event. We're hoping that we have more than that this year. So well-attended event, and it should be fun for all. So come and join us.
Looking forward to that. David?
Thank you, Mayor. One item to report on tonight that is affecting 3 different projects. Today was a meeting with the Wasatch Front Regional Council Technical Advisory Committee, which I have the pleasure to sit on and work with the other engineers around the county. 3 projects were voted for funding for the year 2024 for our city. 70th South Environmental and obtained $1 million in federal funds. 70th South, 15th West Pedestrian Bridge was $1.5 million to build the bridge by Heartland Elementary. And the last bit of funding for the 8600 South Flyover Bridge of $700,000 was awarded. This goes towards the full committee of COG for final vote and final acceptance. Typically, the recommendations of the TAC group are accepted by COG, and so you should expect to see that in the next couple of weeks through the COG committee. And that's it. $3.2 million.
Thank you very much.
Mayor?
Question?
If I might ask a couple quick follow-up questions.
Sure, go ahead.
So the environmental study, $1 million for 70th South, I assume that's to look at the widening, the expansion that needs to happen. And then for the $1.5 million for the pedestrian walkway, you said that's slated to be funded in 2020? 2024. Is that full funding for that walkway, or is there additional funds that are still needed?
That's full funding for the walkway. And typically how it works is you have to do some environmental work, get the environmental clearance, And then you can, if you are ready and your design's ready, you can work with Wasatch Front Regional Council to advance the funding. So funding could be accelerated into the next couple of years if we're ready.
Okay. Thank you.
Chief Peterson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to tell you, we did 5 job offers for new firefighters. These are all related to our 5 retirees that have happened since January. They'll be ready to start recruit school April 23rd, an 8-week recruit camp, a joint camp with West Valley Fire. So we're excited. I think we got 5 really good candidates. And then also just a reminder on Fire Ops 101, which is April 14th. I know a few of you are participating in that, 7 o'clock at Station 54. Thank you.
Thank you. Chief Diamond.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and Council, we have just 2 things. On April 5th, which is next Thursday, not tomorrow, but the following Thursday, we'll have our Citizens Academy. We'll graduate at 6 o'clock. You're welcome to come and attend that graduation. And then also on April 12th, we have 3 police officers that will be graduating from the Academy at 11 o'clock, and that will be held at Post over at the Carroll Miller campus of Salt Lake Community College. And so they will be there as well. And we've also given out 3 or 4, I can't remember if I signed the 4th one yet or not, but there'll be 4 job offer letters for police officers to get them started as well.
Thank you. Move to council reports and start with Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. And first, I just want to welcome all the scouts here tonight. It's great for you to be here and to see how the city functions. The second thing that I want to just invite people to attend is we are in District 4, we are holding a open house on 5600 West road widening, and that'll be on Thursday, April 12th from 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. and that'll be at Ascent Academy at 5662 West, 8200 South. And the construction will be about 120 days or so. There will be a road closure, I think, as part of that, and installing a signal at 8200 South and 5600 West. So I'd like to invite everyone who uses that road frequently, which is a lot, to be able to come to the open house and see as we work on transportation within the city. And that's all I have for tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to let the council know and anybody else who's interested that we had a meeting last Thursday night at Sunset Ridge on the Maples proposed park, future park. I'd like to thank council members Whitelock and Anderson for coming to that as well. And we had very good citizen participation. We had over 30 residents show up to that for a small neighborhood park. So that was great participation, and we had a very lively discussion, and report further is to be expected and forthcoming. So,
thank you.
That's all
Councilmember Whitelock.
I had the opportunity yesterday to meet with some of our employees and the mayor about cemeteries in our city, and we'll be having further discussions on that, and it was kind of enlightening and is making me think about what pioneers did in this valley and how what their choices were helped me and my family, and so that I need to think about that in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lamb.
Nothing tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of things. First one is, I spent last week in Washington, D.C. because my granddaughter, who's in Virginia, turned 3. So I went out there for her birthday, and we went out there, and I happened to be in the Capitol building on the day that they were voting to keep the budget going so we wouldn't have to shut down. But there was such a line to get in there, I didn't make it until after the vote was over. But anyway, I had a good time there. Okay, a couple other things. Boy Scouts, welcome to West Jordan City Council meetings. Hope you enjoy it. Please come again. We'd love to hear from you. And I have a video, 2 videos that I like to show. They were on Facebook. And Scott, go ahead and roll them, please. This is right here on Redwood Road. And as you see, there's a pedestrian attempting to cross Redwood Road on the walk signal, and that truck pulled right when he's trying to go. Now here's the second one. This is even better. Watch this. That's the same one again. Try the other one now.
The one down at the bottom. Get further.
Here we go. So here's the pedestrian waiting for the light to change. You see that the light changed. The pedestrian is walking. These left turn vehicles coming, and look who they're heading for. So when I saw those videos on Facebook, I thought, yes, that intersection does need some attention. So I recognize that that is a UDOT road, but fortunately, David is here and can maybe put a bug in their ear. But so I'm looking for some ideas and some things we could do. Also, I thought at the very minimum what we could do is maybe, if UDOT will give us permission to do so, post some orange flags. We could hold the flags up and maybe they will see the pedestrian at that and look at some other options. I would like Bill Baranowski to take a look at it and see if he has some ideas and see what UDOT suggests. I'd be happy to share those with them as well. And the person who took the videos is here, so we may get to hear from him during public comments. So I'll save the rest for him to share during that time. The other thing I want to mention, on the agendas the last few times, we've got under 7A, we've had on there, it says, discussion and possible action regarding any consent items pulled by the City Council. In my mind, I don't think we need that, because anytime we pull those by the City Council, the mayor determines where those are going to be. And so we can just put those right after our consent items and just put them there. Having this on here makes it difficult if we needed to adjust the schedule. Most of the time we don't. But if there was a situation, maybe I could just make up something, but it may not ever apply. But then he could, as the mayor running the meeting, move that to another spot if he saw fit. Otherwise, he could just keep them right with the consent items. We could just discuss it there before we moved on to business items. That's just a little thought I had on that one. And that's all I have for today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. Three items for tonight. First up, which one do I want to hit first? The mayor and I had the opportunity to attend the rodeo committee meeting last night, and just want to give a quick update. With the resignation of our chair, Nathan Gedge, after a number of years of service, Ben Southworth has been willing to step in, and he'll be serving as that rodeo committee chair. Everything is off to the races already. We've got vendors lined up. We've got one spot that's left, but a couple applications, so vendors look like they're taken care of. Entertainment is all set, ready to go. We have a lot of logistics that still need to be worked out. We're going to be starting with the royalty here pretty quick. We're also going to be looking at signups for the mutton bustin'. And with the increase that the prior council approved to the overall purse, it's shaping up to be an incredibly good rodeo this year. So we'll have other updates, and the mayor can chime in anything else after, since he was there as well. So I don't want to steal too much. I'll leave it at that. Item number 2, also had the opportunity to meet with the Airport Advisory Board, and they're here tonight. We'll be speaking shortly. And I don't want to steal too much of their thunder, but I was just floored when in our last meeting they were able to provide us with a feasibility study regarding a control tower at South Valley Regional Airport. This committee has only been around for a short time. We have some immensely talented, skilled, knowledgeable professionals who are serving on this committee, who are very, very well connected, have worked in aviation for decades, and I'm very much looking forward to their introduction and presentation tonight. So watch for that. The last thing I want to talk about is the pending construction that's going to start on 70th South here, but I'm going to save those comments for remarks at the end of the meeting. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I just had one comment. Last night I attended the school board meeting, Jordan School District Board meeting, and one report was very disturbing to me. and that was somebody from Harriman High School reporting that they were just grieving after their 6th suicide in that school this year. I would hope that if anybody out there has ever witnessed to or knows or feels like somebody may be in danger of taking their own life, they would reach out to them. We've all heard of the if you see something, say something thing going on for a few years now. That could also apply to folks who you think may worry about taking their own life. When I heard that, the 6th suicide at a high school in 1 year, they used the word epidemic. And I think when students start seeing others do that, and it could be that way. So I would hope that anybody that's aware, I just wanted to make you aware that those kinds of things are happening, and sometimes we don't know it and are not aware of it. So with that, I now want to open up citizen comments for anyone here wishing to speak. You'll have 3 minutes to do so. You'll need to give us your name and contact information and watch the little clock, and you'll have 3 minutes. So I'll open it up. We have no one signed up this evening, so I'll open it up to anybody that wishes to come up and up to the podium and take 3 minutes to talk to us. Come ahead.
I'll do it first. Hello. So my name is Matt Conway, and my number is 480-206-2685. Still an Arizona number, but I've been here for 7 years. So I work at the South Redwood Public Health Center, which is right across the parking lot, but I'm speaking on my own behalf. 3 minutes.
Okay, sorry, you can go now.
You're fine. So I take the Red Line train to West Jordan City Center track stop each day, which means I cross the intersection of Redwood Road and 8200 South right out front as a pedestrian 10 times per week. I cross legally. I wear bright colors. I press the walk button to cross the street. And so even after that, when I step off the sidewalk, I am in significant danger from aggressive left-turning drivers. I'm eager to get out of the intersection because, yes, it takes about 2 minutes for the light to turn. I would say in close to about 50% of cases where cars are turning left as I'm crossing, the cars either don't notice me or they ignore me, which leads to them cutting in front of me, quickly going past me, or braking or swerving at the last second. All of which come within a few feet or inches of hitting me. It happens so frequently that I started posting videos of my interactions with cars, as you've seen, in this specific intersection on social media, and also tagging the West Jordan Police Department, but I haven't heard back, but apparently I should have done it with the City Council. According to the Utah State Law, Section 416A1002, an operator of a vehicle shall yield the right-of-way by slowing down or stopping, if necessary, to a pedestrian crossing the roadway within a crosswalk. Salt Lake City ordinance goes further, stating that vehicles must stop when vehicles, in this situation, if a pedestrian is within one lane of the lane they are turning into. Sadly, I could not find any existing city ordinance in West Jordan related to pedestrian safety. I might just not have found it, but I could not find it myself. So I would like to propose maybe a few ideas to address this currently unsafe intersection that many people in this room and also in this center plaza utilize each day. First, maybe we could push for a left turn arrow in the intersection. Maybe one that could be activated only when pedestrians are about to cross. Like if they press the button. Second, step up maybe enforcement on this intersection. The police station is right there. And the county health department also has resources to help educate drivers and pedestrians and anyone who's interested in road safety. I can have that information sent to you if you'd like. And third, consider a city ordinance maybe clarifying who is at fault in intersections by making it clear that operators of vehicles must stop before continuing through the intersection when there's a pedestrian present. Allowing drivers to simply slow down, in my view, provides far too much leniency when coming within inches. Sorry, can I have like one more sentence?
Your time is up. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Is there anyone else that would wish to speak this evening? Seeing none, I will close citizen comments and move to our consent calendar. And no one's asked anything to be pulled, so Councilmember McConaughey.
Move to approve all items on consent.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion to the motion? Seeing none, let's vote.
Councilmember Burton,
Yes?
Mayor Riding,
Yes?
Councilmember Jacob,
Yes.
Councilmember McConaughey,
Aye.
Councilmember Whitelock,
Yes.
Councilmember Lamb,
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson.
Yes.
The vote passes 7 in favor.
We'll now move to our business items on the agenda. Business items 8A, discussion and possible action regarding a presentation from the Airport Advisory Board. Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'll actually just turn it right over to the board with their presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Brett Terpstra. I am the Vice Chair of the South Valley Regional Airport Advisory Board. I am here with Richard Meyer, who is the Chair, and Brian Neville, who is a member of the board as well. The items that we would like to discuss with you pertain to the ongoings of the board and what we've been working on. I would like to give the City Council a brief history of the South Valley Regional Airport. I'd like to talk about the origination of this board, the South Valley Regional Airport Advisory Board. I'd like to discuss the purpose of the board that was established when the board was established. Then the bulk of the presentation will focus on the current discussion items that we have been discussing at our monthly meetings. I'd like to give you a quick overview of the membership of the board so that you're aware of the capabilities that we bring to the table. And then the last slide will be direction from City Council. We would like to get some direction either now or in the near future about the priorities of our board and whether we should modify any of the focus that we've been pursuing. So a quick overview of the history of the airport. You can see that the plot of land here has been established over 75 years ago, initially as Kearns Army Airfield, and then Camp Kearns, and then Army Air Base Kearns. There's a deep history there, and it's a well-established airport. It's been there for 75 years. After World War II, the airport was renamed Salt Lake City Municipal Airport Number 2. Some people still refer to it by its old name, but in 2009, the name of the airport was changed to its current name, South Valley Regional Airport. And so I'll come back to this slide when I get to a further bullet point, but just as an orientation, in case anyone is unfamiliar, you have 78 South here, 62 South here. You have Airport Road and 4800 West over here, and then you have Jordan Landing to the east of the airport. So our board was established last July, and this slide should actually be modified slightly. So July 12th, this resolution was passed. July 26th, there was a separate resolution that established the actual members of the board. So we've been meeting monthly since we became established. And then Utah Code addresses the creation of an airport advisory board in municipalities where an extraterritorial airport is located. So I think it's important to note that although the airport is located in the city of West Jordan, the airport is not owned by the city of West Jordan, which is a fairly unique situation. The city, or the airport is owned by Salt Lake International Airport. So with the purpose for the board, it was to study how South Valley Regional Airport's uses impact the city. Second purpose was to make recommendations to the city council's appointees regarding how to best utilize the airport. And the third priority was to advise city council on any request for proposal for a fixed base operator, and an FBO would generally provide services at the airport, such as fuel and flight training and things of that nature. There has not been an RFP for a fixed base operator, so we have not focused on that. Most of our main focus has been on how to best utilize the South Valley Regional Airport and its surrounding areas. So the main items that we've been discussing are how can we better enable IFR traffic. I hope I don't use terms that you're unfamiliar with. So IFR traffic would be when you're trying to fly into the airport and the weather is really bad and you may not see the airport until you're within 200 feet of the runway. So currently that's a problem at South Valley Regional Airport, because if someone doesn't see the runway and they have to, we call it go missed, and go around, they tend to conflict with the traffic out of Salt Lake International Airport. So that becomes a limitation of the airport here at South Valley. We've been looking at whether or not a control tower is feasible at South Valley Regional Airport. At our meeting last week, Brian brought a feasibility report that was produced by Midwest Air Traffic Control. So I just got a chance to read that today, and we're pretty enthusiastic about trying to let the city council know if this is something that we think is feasible. Initially, our very first meetings, we talked about what is our vision for South Valley Regional Airport amongst ourselves. We have a member that's very enthusiastic about an aviation museum or a Utah historical museum in or around the airport. And so when it comes to the direction that we get from City Council, that's some input that we would like, and really input for all of these items here. As far as standardizing the traffic pattern at South Valley Regional Airport, that is something that we're wondering if City Council would like us to pursue further as far as making recommendations and researching. I'll go back to this slide. Currently, if you take off going north, this would be considered runway 3-4, and you would do traffic patterns in this manner, which is called a standard traffic pattern. If the wind is coming from the south, you would take off on runway 16, and you would make a non-standard traffic pattern. That's the way that the airport is designed right now. And so you can see that both traffic patterns, where you practice your takeoff and landings, put you over this residential area. And so that, I'm not sure if that causes problems with complaints. That could be an issue. It could also be an issue that we think, for safety purposes, it would probably be better to be standardized, because that's what most pilots expect, is that you would always make left-hand traffic patterns. So the big change there would be, if it was standardized and you took off runway 16, you would do your pattern in this manner here, put you over Jordan Landing. We've discussed the feasibility of a drone park somewhere within the city limits of West Jordan, and we're curious if there's space for that. And Brian has done a lot of work to look into what a possible design of that could be. And so we think that that may bring some economic benefit to the city of West Jordan, although we would probably not recommend it be located at the airport itself. The master plan is very outdated. We're wondering how we can assist in updating that, or if we should focus on that. And then the last point, my understanding is the prior city council had a desire to see how West Jordan could acquire the soccer fields that are located just south of the airport. I'm told that West Jordan does not own that property. And if that is something that this board should proceed in pursuing, we would like direction on that as well. I'll quickly run through the membership. So we have the chair here, who's Richard Meyer, West Jordan resident and a senior mechanic. Myself, as the vice chair, I am a West Jordan resident and a prior helicopter flight instructor. Brian Neville, a West Jordan resident who is retired from the FAA, served many roles, including accident investigator, pilot inspector, and operations inspector. Doug Fricks, who is a West Jordan employer. He owns and operates Aerotech Aviation out of the airport, South Valley Airport. Daniel Williams, West Jordan resident, retired FAA control tower operator, amongst other accomplishments. And finally, Jason Hess, West Jordan resident, vice commander of Civil Air Patrol, which, if you're not aware, they conduct a lot of search and location operations. They're almost 100% volunteer. And then the last slide is we've let you know what topics we've been discussing and avenues we've been pursuing. I think it would benefit our board to get some specific direction from City Council on whether we should maintain the topics that we've been pursuing, or if you would like us to focus in a specific area, or maybe not focus on a topic that we mentioned tonight. I think that would help us with the time that we spend together as a board. And so if there are any questions, one last thing, I guess, I didn't mention this. Another thing that we could get direction from the mayor on is whether you would rather have us meet after the Salt Lake International Board meets, because currently we do that after that board meets. We have our meeting the following week. I thought that would be advantageous so that we could get any action items, work on those as soon as possible. But if you would prefer us to meet a week prior to that Salt Lake International Board, we can do that as well.
To answer that question, I think I'd rather have you meet after as you are. And the reason being is because if you're just like a week after, it would give us time to get any issue that comes up onto the Salt Lake City Airport Board agenda.
Okay.
If we met just prior to theirs, it wouldn't be time to get it on the agenda. So I think to keep it the way you've got it now was probably the best option.
Okay.
And there are some things I think as you brought up today that need to be on their agenda to discuss with them. So,
right.
Soccer fields, tower, there are some issues that are out there that we do need to bring to their attention as well and see where we can go with them. So right now I've got Councilmember McConaughey next up.
Thank you, Mayor. First off, I want to thank the board for their presentation, for their time and their efforts here. Very, very much appreciate all that you do to help advance aviation and help us get the best use out of that airport. Also want to acknowledge that the lobbyist firm, Fox & Paganelli, that represents West Jordan is here, and they've been working on these issues as well. And there's some good overlap between what's been asked of the two. So we'll make sure that you have the proper connections to work with them. They've also been tasked with working on things like the soccer fields and potential things that we can, potential ways to improve the airport. For the benefit of the council, where the prior council left the marching orders was pretty much with what you saw today. Control tower was on our wish list, but I really didn't think, Mr. Neville, that's impressive, bringing back that feasibility study so quick. I did not think that would happen so soon. We've wanted to pursue a control tower here for quite some time to improve safety and improve use of the airport. There are a number of constrictions that we have around the airport right now because it's visual only, just radio traffic between pilots, there's no assistance, so that would improve safety. The other one that was hit on was the standardization of the traffic pattern. Personally, I would absolutely love to see them follow through with this a little bit more. Again, it would improve safety having this be standard left-hand pattern with what the majority of other airports are doing, and would also help mitigate some of the concerns with noise and complaints that we receive on occasion from the neighboring communities to the left. or to the left, to the west. And then drones, pursuit of various options regarding drones and drone parks is relatively new. That's something that the committee came up with, but I think has a lot of promise. So I would like to encourage them to continue with that. But I just want to put that out there as kind of a baseline for those who are new to the council and hadn't been involved in prior conversations. So with that, I'll leave it for further conversation, and then the mayor can give marching orders. So thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. I too appreciate the efforts of the board on this, on the facility and bettering the usage of it. I am part of the former council that helped drive some of these items as far as I wrote some notes down, as far as the tower, the soccer fields, the land that's around the facility, what could happen with that. And I'm very interested in the drone park and to see what possibilities exist there. I do think the airport is underutilized the way it's currently set up. And I understand we still don't have an FBO there. And it's not something that I guess we control. It's something that Salt Lake City would control. But I love the work that you're doing, and whatever we can do to have better utilization of Salt Lake's airport to the benefit of West Jordan, I would be in full support of. That's all I have. Thanks, Mayor.
Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, gentlemen. Great presentation. Thanks for the work you're doing. I'm pleased with the direction you're going. I'd like to see you continue going that way. Something you brought up, perhaps having someone from your committee to help on the master land use plan. I think that warrants some good thought. So I would say let's take a look at that and see if we want to do that, because the airport is a big part of the city, and so that should have some say on what goes around it, because some people like it and some like it more. So thank you very much for what you're doing.
Councilmember Lamb.
Thank you, Mayor. I grew up in West Jordan as a child, and I remember when we had air shows out at the airport. So I've had a few people ask me the same question, hey, when do you bring the air shows back? So I don't know if it's feasible now with all the homes that are out there, but if there's a possibility of some type of air show in the future, I'd like to see that be part of a feasibility study as well, or some kind of information that we could see to see if that is something that we could do in West Jordan again. So thank you.
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. I forgot one little comment. It was, as mentioned, and I previously lived in Kearns a number of years ago, and it was the Kearns Airfield for a long time. And one of the slides showed like a historical museum or something along those lines. And there is an individual in Kearns who has collected boxes and boxes and boxes of World War II stuff related to the Kearns Airfield, now called South Valley Regional Airport. So there might be some collaboration or something along those lines. So that's all I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think if we were to give you any direction, it would be to keep going exactly how you're going. I think this is, there's a lot of things I think we need to bring up to the Salt Lake City Airport Advisory Board. And the things that you're talking about here are some of those things we need to bring up. And it wouldn't be out of the question, I think, if we get some things on the agenda, if one of you were able to come and present at that. Perhaps the tower situation, who knows? But we need to just have you keep going and keep doing what you're doing. So it's a good thing for the city. I think there's, as has been mentioned, the airport probably is underutilized. There are things that can be done there, I believe, and we need to probably encourage Salt Lake City as much as we can with some of those things. So on that board, I do happen to sit next to Mayor Biskupski, so I can bend her ear a little bit.
Mayor, one of the things you could do is encourage Salt Lake City to donate the airport to West Jordan.
I wish we could afford it. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you for your time.
Business item 8B, discussion and update from representatives from the Utah League of Cities and Towns and Fox and Pignanelli. David Bricky, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. The league is not here tonight, but we have the good fortune of having the team of Foxley and Pignanelli which includes Ms. Callie and Ms. Johnson. The reality is we take on that 45-day window of making sausage we call law. It's really nice to have individuals on the Hill that are present, available, and informed. All 4 of these individuals were literally available at the drop of a hat. With a phone call, they would meet with us. They were kind enough to give their advice even when it was in conflict with the league. It was nice to have that asset in our corner. So I've asked them to come and help us identify what it is that we need to do this next year to make this city more viable when it comes to the activity on the Hill. They have a handout that I've put in front of you, and that they will probably go over about some timelines and some ideas of how to better make ourselves a player up on the Hill. So if I could turn the time over to who first? Mr. Piganelli, thank you. And this is Renee Cowley.
Welcome. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. My understanding is Renee Cowley is the newest member of the rodeo committee. Volunteer. Renee Cowley, in addition to being a great lobbyist, is also a professional barrel racer. And so she's happy to help out West Jordan in developing, making a great rodeo into even a greater rodeo.
And personally appreciative of the increase in the rodeo purse. Thank you.
We are honored to represent West Jordan. It's a great city with great potential and lots of enthusiasm and ideas that always come out. And we've been especially appreciative of the council mayor this year because of their interest in some of the things that we'll be talking about that's so important to help West Jordan do the things they need to do to represent and serve their constituents. And a great shout out to Dave Bricky. You have a wonderful /city attorney /city manager. He does a great job, very conscientious, and is well respected on Capitol Hill and the other corridors of power. Mr. Bricky asked us not so much to give a legislative report of what happened. You'll be getting a lot of that from the league, and we're happy to fill in for that because there's some things that we did that might be a little bit different. But what he asked us to do is talk a little bit about moving forward, some of the things that the council and the mayor and others need to do to promote our legislative objectives going into 2018. So on the handout, what you'll see very quickly, we want to list for you the number of bill requests. It was a record number of bill requests that the legislature faced. It was one shy of the record passed, 534 bills. You know, the budget's bigger than ever, and so that's kind of the scenario that we're facing. So we have to be strategic in how we approach the legislature. Some of the legislative issues that we faced in 2018 that will be around the 2019 and 2020 sessions. You have this internal struggles within the Republican Party, which is obviously the dominant party up at the Capitol, that we can take advantage of if we want to, but we have to deal with changes to how revenue is collected. As you know, it changes how transportation is dealt with. I know you had a report from Senator Harper, who was behind that. The initiative scare, which is always around, drives everything. The tax of schools, and the inland port. All those issues are being considered in future sessions. Do you want to take the next one?
Yeah, but also to circle back on kind of the internal GOP war, you're seeing kind of some interesting dynamics with the upcoming election as well. In terms of what's going to be happening in the primary, but also in terms of how elections are administered. Your county to the south is looking to do away with vote by mail, citing cost savings as part of that rationale. There are now one of 3 counties this year that will not be doing vote by mail. It might be something that this county will be pressured into considering, but is a dynamic that this city and county will have to consider in terms of administering elections coming up. Certainly. One of the roles that Fox Piganelli plays as advisors to the city in terms of how priorities are set, and then it is our job to go help push through those priorities and deal with the legislature, other coalitions, and stakeholders in advancing your priorities. In terms of how the city arrives at those priorities is solely up to the city. There are ways that different surrounding cities do it. It's really up to the city and how you determine that, but we would recommend formalizing an official process of how the city arrives at what their legislative priorities are. We had several working group meetings where we discussed back and forth kind of some of the key areas that the city was looking at, but in terms of sort of formalizing priorities legislatively, as well as economic development, is really going to be important in advancing the success of the city's priorities and giving us clarity and direction. Also, creating those priorities early on, identifying what they are, knowing that they can change, ebb and flow a little bit and evolve as the year progresses through interim committees and otherwise, but determining those priorities early on, then communicating them to your West Jordan representatives and legislators is going to be important in terms of giving the city enough time and runway to advance these priorities. Furthermore, understanding that once a city does take a position on these key priorities, knowing that all members of the city will be singing from the same hymnal, playing from the same playbook, and knowing that everyone is on board and advancing these same priorities will be very helpful in terms of giving us that direction that we need. We also would love to see the council continue to be engaged and become more engaged in the process as we move forward. Fox Piganelli is happy to communicate as much as the council wants us to during the legislative session, knowing that is a frenetic pace for 45 days. But we would love to involve and incorporate council members as much as possible in terms of individual meetings at the legislature before the legislative session ever begins, and then of course during. The personal relationships that many of the council members have with their West Jordan legislators is very important to advancing those priorities, and being able to utilize those appropriately will be very helpful, again, in advancing the city's priorities. Building those coalitions with other cities and other West Jordan legislators. We would recommend holding several working group meetings with your West Jordan legislators to communicate the priorities that are determined by the city. Hearing from them the insight that they have, being members of the chamber, being members of the body at the legislature, understanding what the political dynamics look like from those who are representing your city, getting their feedback, and again, communicating to them what the positions and priorities are of the city will be paramount. And then we've kind of set some sort of tentative dates that we're happy to follow the direction of the city on what those dates would look like. We recommend perhaps June, and then again late November, right after the legislative session and after leadership is determined. And then follow-up conversations again between that late November date and the beginning of session.
One of the things that we wanted to emphasize is that what's key is that have your discussions here behind the room there, or the working groups, but it's imperative. You have some great representatives in the legislature, and they want to do what's best, and they want to work with you, but it's imperative that you have one in the united front. That's where some of our competitor cities like Sandy, West Valley City, and others, they can be our allies, but sometimes we're in competition with them. And where they've succeeded, where we have it, is that they're united. They decide, they may argue amongst themselves, but then they go after it. And so it's a great formula. And West Jordan's a great city with a lot of great opportunities, and we should be able to accomplish a lot there. It is also required that we have listed here is coalition building. And the mayor's done a great job of reaching out to other mayors, especially on the west side. And so I know some of you have been talking to your colleagues. Having those coalitions is so key, is so critical to the development of a successful legislative agenda. Because you may pick up issues in your conversations with them, saying, okay, we need to do that West Jordan, but also developing the relationships. For example, a year ago in the legislative session, we were fighting for some changes. We were all alone. Other cities may have agreed with us. They said, in fact, they said they agreed with us, but they didn't have the relationships. We need to really push that even harder, that you have those relationships with other cities, because you'll be surprised how many of them are willing to ally themselves with West Jordan to accomplish the same legislative goals. One of the things, and Renee's really good at this, but we want to talk to you about is consider doing a citizen survey. We suggested this to the council a couple years ago. It's something that other councils like South Jordan and others do to help you, not so much the technical legislative priorities, but some of the other priorities that you may have that you may say, okay, that's something we need to pursue that's really registering in all parts of the area or most of the area. Do you want to talk a little bit about the survey too?
Sure, this is one more tool that the city can utilize in determining what these, like Frank said, the legislative priorities, but also what the community's priorities are. Which areas of redevelopment are most important. It's also a key indicator of citizen satisfaction to know how your residents are feeling about the services provided by the city. Do they know all the services provided by the city, and what is their level of satisfaction with those services? It might help identify areas for improvement that the city didn't realize before. We've seen this in other cities as well, as Frank mentioned, South Jordan, Holiday, Orem in particular, that have utilized these surveys as conducted by statistical research experts. It's able to be administered online for reduced costs instead of phone surveys, but still produce a statistically sound information back. But again, it's kind of one more tool that the city could utilize to help understand what the citizens want to see from the city, what areas of legislative priorities you might want to prioritize, and gauging that citizen satisfaction level as well to maybe identify areas of improvement that the city wasn't previously aware of.
So just kind of to focus in on a couple things. On the coalition building of the handout, we know that in the past there have been some issues identified. One that Mr. Brickey has identified is the eliminating the fee, the ability of the county to impose a fee on CRA projects. And Representative Coleman has just been tenacious on reforming CRA to her credit. That's something she wants to look at. But that's going to require coalition building with other cities, because the county is going to do its best to stop that from happening. So we need to build a coalition so that it frees you up. No one has more to gain from limiting a fee than West Jordan. But there can be some other communities that also have some things to gain, and we need to build that coalition. We'd like you to consider that. We can hop on that right away to make that something we can accomplish down the road. Our relation with the county is a different one, because we have issues with the county, but at the same time we have to work with the county. So there's ways to accomplish that by building the coalitions. The county respects that, and then they do their best. They may try to do the best to counter it, but they understand if they're facing a whole bunch of entities that are opposed to them, Salt Lake County then will try to work with us. And we have to, it's a very political, but that's how things happen up there. Coalition potential relies with, we talked about the League of Cities and Towns, but also, with our legislators who are very active in a lot of issues, the Governor's Office of Economic Development. They want to be supportive of West Jordan. The mayor and some of the council members have done a great job of repairing the relationships we have with GOED and EDCU, so that will be helpful. But you have to keep that in mind. And they may not be openly supportive on some issues, but behind the scenes they can be very, very helpful in what we're trying to accomplish. And so can UDOT. UDOT has a lot of influence up at the Capitol and in the corridors, and as you know, they really carry a big stick, and so the more we can do to enhance those relationships is helpful. Participation with the Wasatch Front Regional Council is important for us too, and I know that Mr. Murphy in prior meetings has wanted to make sure that there is representation for the council and his various committees to ensure that West Jordan gets his piece of the pie, and that we're active with the RDA Association. I was very grateful to get on the airport. Representative Coleman, as you know, has been tenacious. Some of you have been very hardworking, and to know there's at last the airport committee, it just warmed my heart to hear that. But there was a lot more we need to do on the airport. But you need to decide what we do with the airport. Do we want the airport, or do we just want the soccer fields? This is an issue that I would hope that this council and this mayor and this staff decide sometime this year, because we need to know, we need to have that direction of where you want to go, what you want to utilize that property for, along with the other issues. Anything else you want to know? So that's what we have laying out for you. We don't want to give you any extra work, but we want to work with you to accomplish those goals that are so important for the city and for the residents.
Thank you. Is there any questions? I think I saw one light go on, but
we do have some. Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. I love what you did this session. I'm grateful that this group up here is unified. And what I will tell you for the foreseeable future, for at least for me, number one will be transportation, number two will be economic development. And however that relates to the airport property, soccer fields, other places, the state toying with the idea of municipal land use. When you look at the prison, you look at homeless shelters, and you look at the Northwest Quadrant. those things are of interest to me. And the one reason I mentioned transportation is one of the issues that we face in West Jordan City is we have, since it's a boundary, I'm going to say half of 6200 South, the eastbound half is West Jordan. 70th South, which is not contiguous because we have the airport property, and the way things are designed now, we couldn't connect the two sides if there were a tunnel or whatever. You have 78th, which has a small segment that's just eastbound only. I'm sorry, westbound only. So it's just one way. And 90th South, and we have a population of 114,000 people that really have 62, a portion of 70th, 78th, except for one little bit that goes one way, which we're going to address, and 90th. So the improvements to Bangerter Highway, the improvements we're making to 5600 West, the Mountain View Corridor, even West Jordan supporting getting it connected to I-80 and doing something to connect it to the connection in Utah County so that the residents on the far west side that are in my district have the option to go north and south to get into Salt Lake or out of town. I'll just give you an example. I woke up this morning in Zion National Park and drove here to make the meeting. Using Google Maps to determine, it said I would get home about 5 o'clock if I took I-15 to 90th South. So I had my son, since I'm driving, he was my navigator, and he Google mapped it and changed it, and we knocked 20 minutes off if I got off in Lehigh and went to Mountain View Corridor to come home, and got home at 4:40 instead of 5 o'clock. And so there is an advantage to try and, for example, I think West Jordan can be supportive of finding the fund, helping the state find the funding to complete Mountain View Corridor in its entirety because the city benefits from that. And working with, like Mayor Riding is working with a coalition of mayors. The second thing is I love the timeline that you mentioned as far as we need to be ahead of the game. We're a first-class city. We should lobby collectively like a first-class city. And that's not a reflection on you, just us as a city entity, the meetings in June and knowing ahead of time. And I would propose to the council that we have the 3 or 4 or 5 items that are a priority for West Jordan City. And on all other items, we just initially adopt the league position, unless there's something as we review that and as the items happen very quickly at the legislature that we may need to change. But initially, we have the transportation, economic development, and on the things that we haven't discussed, we just default to the league position. So those are the only comments that I had to make, and I do appreciate all the effort that you put in on behalf of the city. That's all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of questions, carrying on with Councilman Anderson's comments. And I like what you're saying about meeting and building a coalition and going together, all united. I think that's important. Part of the problem we have, however, is things change quickly and on short notice, and sometimes we may not know they changed until we're kind of behind it. What do you think about, and would you be willing, during the legislative session when that's happening, so we don't have to default to what the league is, which may or may not be in line with what West Jordan wants, of coming to our city council meetings each week during that time, and then in between there, on the Wednesdays in between, that'd just be once a week. I know that wouldn't solve all the problems, would help a lot. Then we could hear what changes. So if we want to change a focus on a bill or something, we could do that. I realize we're asking you to come here several times in the evenings and doubling our time in the month of January, February, and March. Well, mostly February and March.
We're willing to come to West Jordan anytime. I'm going to suggest it may be rough for us to, because oftentimes committees go past, sometimes they go past 6 or 7 o'clock. I think there might be times where we could, early in the session, do it. But you'd be handicapping us if maybe there might be some alternative things we could do, maybe by phone or email, but, let's look, there might be, do you want to take it from that on that?
Oh, no, listen, Councilman, I appreciate the question. I think sometimes with other entities we work with, we kind of have the same time, same place conference call. And in some ways, I think that might be a more effective mechanism of doing this. I think if we could do this weekly, I think that would be a really good thing. And if it's one of those things, you'd have to rely on council and others. But I think that's something that, you could schedule. I think we could do it in conjunction with the Open Meetings Act. I think if there were, on occasion, there would be certain things you maybe could close it down for. But I think there's a mechanism we could work with you, the mayor, and David and others on to work with. It may not be quite as laborious, but may be as effective or more effective.
Thank you.
Maybe, do you have work sessions?
We do not.
Okay.
But if we did, they would have been earlier in the evening instead of later in the evening. So that would make it more difficult for you, though, right?
That's what I think. Maybe we do a call then. When it gets deep into the session.
Yeah.
We step out and do the call then.
And if I may, the current process that we've been utilizing is as bills become public and as there are changes to bills, we send a nightly email and report to the city, and we can, make that as robust as possible, and that could, having the weekly same time, same place calls are very, very effective for many of our clients. In addition to that, as you are well aware, Councilman, that there are changes very quickly, sometimes hour to hour. And so being able to communicate effectively and quickly is very important, in addition to those sort of same time, same place calls or meetings that would take place. So it once again is upon the council to give us the direction that you would like in terms of how you would like us to communicate, how you would like the process to look to take positions on things, whether that can be through an email thread or, again, at the direction of the city manager and mayor and council. We will take your direction on how you would like that to happen, but understanding that those changes in positions sometimes need to be made rather quickly.
That's good, and I appreciate the daily emails during that time because they are very effective for us. The drawback we have is, as I read that, you don't have the council's consensus. You might get Councilman Burton's consensus, which should be the same as all theirs, but sometimes it's not. Thank you.
Well, let's work with Mr. Bricky. We can set something up, and then maybe we can figure out another way for communications to happen. Mr. Bricky did a great job. He was up there almost every day, and we were able to advise him on all the things that were happening. But there are opportunities to expand that for the benefit of the council and mayor.
And, I think that what Councilmember Burton is stating is that we would like to keep that line of communication open always. And I think as we move through this year and we have a pretty good idea of what we're trying to get our legislators to do for the city and what others might be doing that would impact the city, and you're aware of all of those things too, probably the most important thing you could do is be your presence up on the Hill and just keep that communication back with us as much as you possibly can, so that to me the most important thing is that you're up there, and David was up there a lot. He has made a lot of contacts. I don't think we could have had a better presence up there than David, and as much as hopefully he's got some more help next year, so that he's not killing himself as he tries to get everything done. But that being said, I'm going to move to Councilmember Whitelock. She's next up.
Thank you. I think that's a great idea to have a work meeting for our council. Frank, what an awesome idea. Councilmember Jacob doesn't really like me always sharing school board things, so this time I'm going to go to the PTA board because we did the same thing. But what we found very effective was that from our bigger group, we chose a group that was much smaller that could represent us legislatively. And it takes a lot of trust, and it takes a lot of reporting back and forth. But we found it on both of the big boards that I've served on very effective, that when we had that key group of people that would go up to the Capitol, what occurred especially on the school board, because we were elected officials and we were looked at differently. When I had my PTA badge on, I was looked at differently than when I had my school board badge on. When I was an elected official, it was more of a peer relationship that we were working, and it became very effective. So it's something that I think our council should consider, that we may want to see who might be available to at least go up there weekly. We can interface with the lobbyists, and it does a couple of things. It not only helps us interface with the lobbyists, it helps us interface with the other cities that are up there and our legislators. And they know we're there, and they know we care, and that goes a really long way. So I think it's something that we might, you might want to consider. I found it very effective and seen very positive benefits from it.
Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for coming tonight and for presenting and standing there as we all discuss what we're going to do. We need to keep in mind, I think this is a great idea. I think our city manager, we need to have a single point of contact, but we need to know what the issues are that the legislature is dealing with that affect us. We need to come together as a council and vote on how we feel about it so that we have an official position. We can't direct the staff to say, go support something one-on-one, that's a no-no, so we can't do that. So we need to be very informed and very engaged. If we want to benefit from the legislature, we have to put in the effort as the seven of us. We can't have, oh gosh, another meeting, I'd rather not go. No thanks. It's going to require a lot of engagement if we want to engage. Like was mentioned, bills change by the hour some days. And if we're disengaged, and granted we have jobs, most of us have a day job and we have other commitments and we're doing other things, but we need to be able to chime in from time to time, or whatever it's going to take. We need to be able to engage actively and legally. So we're going to have to figure that out, how we do that. It's not an easy, there's not an easy solution there, and it's not an easy step to take, but if we want to stop playing a passive role at the legislature, we need to stop being passive. So, yes, building coalitions with our neighboring cities and all of these things, and even our legislators and even other legislators, because there's 75 of them in the House and 29 of them in the Senate, there's a lot of people. Knowing all of them, or many of them, is going to be very beneficial so that when we do speak, they know who we are. But that said, we got to make sure that we're engaged and that we're doing it properly and legally somehow. So fortunately, we have a lawyer sitting in our top seat, so maybe that's a good thing. Just wanted to put that out there. And thank you again.
Thank you. With that, I'll turn it back to our city manager.
Thank you. We again appreciate all of the commitment and time and effort Foxley, Piganelli, Kelly, and Johnson have put into this matter. Thank you. We'll look forward to working, identifying a June date sooner than later, and then working from there to set other dates throughout the year.
Great.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. Business item 8C, discussion of possible action regarding ordinance 18-09, amending the 2009 West Jordan Municipal Code, Title 9, Utilities, Chapter 8, Stormwater Damage Financial Assistance Program. Paul Dodd.
Thank you, Mayor. This was sent to us to look at redrafting. There was some specific direction given to us by a couple of the council members, and we've done this. It's in a form that we could have more changes if the council likes, but it's ready to be presented. If the council would like to have more changes, you can give us that direction tonight, but I'll turn the time over to Mr. David Quayle, who is the one who helped draft this for our office.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As Paul said, this is a pretty significant rewrite of the stormwater damage program that's already in place. And some of you may know the background, but basically kind of 2011 to 2015 timeframe, there were some complaints about stormwater flooding that was coming off of the 3200 West stormwater line, where when that would reach capacity, the inflow sites from adjacent neighborhoods would backflow out into those neighborhoods, and there'd be some flooding of homes maybe that had downsloping driveways, those sorts of things. City took two actions in response to that. One was to do some pretty significant upgrades to the stormwater system itself, put backflow regulators, that sort of thing, which my understanding has largely stopped the backflow issues. The second was to put in place this stormwater damage financial assistance program. So the comments we had kind of started with two individuals who came in and recently made claims under the program, filed applications that raised some issues about timing timing regulations that are in the ordinance, and language specificity, those sorts of things. So we took a look at it, and what's before you is our proposed language, and we tried to do four things when we rewrote this. The first was that we wanted to be exactly clear on what the benefit was that this program provided. There was some ambiguity as to how much money someone could get, how they could get it, what for. So we broke that down into largely three separate sections in the code, each with their own separate application process. The first is 9-8-5, and that would authorize up to $10,000 in financial assistance for quote-unquote cleanup costs. The next is 9-8-6, which is $10,000 for substantiated property damage. And then the third would be 9-8-7, which is up to $10,000 in financial assistance for approved remediation efforts. That way it's clear to someone who comes in to file an application, you have three separate and distinct areas where you could receive financial assistance under this program. The second thing we wanted to do was be clear about what those terms meant. So we added a definition section to the ordinance that defines cleanup costs. It defines substantiated property damage, approved remediation efforts, and it even defines what a stormwater flooding event is. That way when someone comes in, there can't be any questions about what's covered, what events can lead to an appropriate application under the ordinance. The third thing we did was try to take some specific direction from council members regarding time bars in the ordinance. There is currently a 1-year time bar in the ordinance where an application has to be filed within 1 year of the flooding event. We doubled that to 2 years. We left it at 2 years and left a time frame in there for a couple of reasons. The first and foremost is that our risk manager needs to know what claims are out there for potential liability from the city. And while this isn't a liability issue, the way it's budgeted now and that we carried over is these payments would come out of the liability claims budget line item. So from a budget standpoint, if someone came in and filed an application for $30,000, that's $30,000 less that the city would have to pay liability claims. So 2 years, what would happen is the risk manager could put on his calendar, for 2 years I need to budget that I have potential for flood damage claims. Without that there, it's an open-ended floodgate, if you will, where we could all of a sudden get claims that were unexpected. There were also some additional timelines that were pretty short for appeals, 3 days, and we extended those to 10 business days upon suggestion. And another big change is we allowed for payment to be based off of bids. The way it was written, or is written now, is for actual costs incurred, which would mean proof of invoices, or actual monies spent by the applicant. We've allowed in this rewrite for bids to be submitted, and then payment could happen based on an advance, if you will, based on those bids. So those are the three changes we made based on council members' direct comments. The fourth, and this is probably the biggest change in the rewrite, and it somewhat permeates every section of the proposed ordinance here, is we tried to make this square a little more closely with insurance practices and procedures. When you look at this, it's largely a free flood insurance program for the residents of West Jordan, where if they suffer a flooding event, they can come in and get assistance. So that took a couple of different forms, the way we put that in. One, for example, is an early notice requirement for individuals who have been flooded. And that's different than an application for the money. This is just a notice requirement where the applicant would need to come in and say, hey, my home was flooded. The purpose of that is so that the risk manager or a designee could go out, look at the property in a way akin to what an adjuster would do, an insurance adjuster, verify damage has occurred, what type of property was damaged, the condition of the property, those sorts of things. It also has a provision in there where we would permit, if the risk manager couldn't get out in time, high resolution photos, video, those sorts of things as an alternate option. Excuse me. So that's one change we made to bring in line with insurance policies. The other, we made to somewhat help facilitate the advance payment based on bids. So I think we're all familiar with the idea that your car gets a dent and you make a claim against your insurance, you get a little bit of money, you decide you can live with the dent in your car, you keep the dent, take the money and pay off a medical bill or something like that, which is all perfectly fine when you're dealing with a policy that you've purchased, it's private money, that sort of thing. But because this is a taxpayer-funded program, we felt like we needed to put protections in for the taxpayer. And those take the form of basically requiring any advanced funds to be substantiated within 90 days. So say you come in and you get $5,000 based on a bid to put new drywall and carpet in the flooded area of your basement. You would then be required within 90 days to either come in with actual invoices showing that the work in the bid was actually completed. You could have the risk manager come out and do an inspection. Building permits and building inspections could qualify under this ordinance, or the applicant could simply file a declaration under state law, which is similar to an affidavit verifying that they did actually incur the expenses that are listed on the bid that form the basis for the advance of payments. So those are the large changes, the overall picture of this ordinance and what we tried to achieve with the rewrite. Any questions, I'd be more than happy to address.
First question I have is, does the ordinance state what the cause of flooding would be if we're going to?
It does. If you would look at the definition section, which is 9-8-2, there is a definition of stormwater runoff flooding event, and that defines, and I can just read it for you, it's a rain or snow melt event that, one, causes a portion of the city's stormwater system to become filled to capacity. That's the 3200 West becoming filled to capacity. Two, the overfilling then causes a backflow out of intake points, which is what was happening when this program was initially passed. And then the third component of that definition is that backflowed water would come into a residence causing damage. So it's defined in a way that's very specific to the problem that precipitated this program in the first place.
That was my main question, because if, for instance, somebody ran over a fire hydrant in front of somebody's house and the water coming out of that fire hydrant went down and flooded the house in front of that fire hydrant, would the city be liable for the flooding in that case?
That would not be covered by this ordinance.
That was what I wanted to make sure, that we didn't have some extraneous reasons why. That it
No.
was just stormwater flooding.
Correct. I drafted it very narrow and tailored to the problem that the ordinance was designed to correct or address.
Okay, Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. Not necessarily questions, but rather comments. First of all, I like the general approach taken to try to streamline it a little bit better. The original ordinance was written rather quickly, and I don't think clearly articulated what we're looking for. A lot of the administration that had to be based off historical knowledge that was gained right there at the time that it was passed, so it's good to have this cleaned up. Some of the things that I'm not wild about, the idea of having to do 3 separate claims. I prefer to see the person be able to do just one claim and set it over, and maybe within the claim lay out the 3 different portions. But here, having one claim that they submit for cleanup, a separate claim for the remediation, or a separate claim for property damage, and a separate claim for remediation, that seems like a lot of extra work. The other thing is cleanup and property damage are both required to submit to the city recorder or city clerk, and remediation is required to submit to Public Works, which seems a little bit odd, especially as we get our new building, having them submit 2 claims here, 1 claim over there, when my understanding is the clerk should be the one who's responsible for all of those. So I'd like to see it changed so they all fall into one nice, clean category. As I'm looking at the individual sections here, first of all, for payment of cleanup cost, I'd like to see that section A mirror more closely what we have for the section with substantiated property damage claims. I'd like to remove this section where it says the city may pay, comma, from the risk management liability claims budget line item, comma. I'd rather not codify which line item of the budget it should be paid from, because if something happens with the budget, then someone could argue, oh, well, we're not, I don't think that one's necessary. Where it goes through the different methods of submitting the claim in section B, personally by U.S. certified mail or other commercial, I don't know that we need that detail, as long as it gets recorded, submitted to the city recorder and stamped as received with that date. B1, if cleanup and sanitation activities were undertaken before the applicant, the city will reimburse the applicant's cleanup cost. I don't like the word will. I prefer may. A couple places like that. But with cleanup cost, let me get away from the nitty-gritty stuff for a second. With cleanup cost, we're only showing stuff that's been paid for or they have invoices for. Whereas in the past with some of these things, you have a lot of effort and a lot of energy. Some people may not want to wait the time to have somebody come out and may go it on their own. If I spend 2 weeks, take 2 weeks off of work so that I can clean everything out, take down all the drywall, get all my possessions in order, I'm not eligible for any reimbursement for cleanup based on that. Historically, that's not necessarily how we've operated. So I want to make sure that we can account for that.
So accounting, meaning you'd like, so say you took 2 weeks off work and personally cleaned up your home, some accounting where you could be reimbursed.
If we can quantify the number of hours that somebody put towards the effort and then maybe associate some sort of dollar value with it for their own time and effort. I know when I've had a flooding claim through the insurance company, they did reimburse me for my own work and not necessarily just what was done out of pocket or what was paid out of pocket.
Did they have a standardized rate where it wasn't based off of maybe your personal rate, but a standard insurance industry rate?
Actually, they did it based on square footage. They said based on the square footage that was damaged, here's the amount that we'll authorize. So it wasn't even off of hours, which I thought was useful and might be a little bit easier than trying to go with this. The other thing is you'll also have a lot of neighbors help out. I know there were a lot of folks that were there when my home flooded, trying to help clean up. I just don't want to make it feel like somebody's being penalized for doing work on their own to try and solve their own problem. I really want to avoid that. Then there's a section here for advanced payment for cleanup cost. I'm not wild about it. I understand the thought process and why some of these restrictions are around it. I don't know that I'm not a fan of it. I'd be perfectly fine if that was completely just removed and we say we're not going to do advance payment, or we shrink it down to a small section saying something to the effect that the city's risk manager determines it's in the best interest of the city to do it, then we can go ahead and do something, but all of the detail behind that. From a philosophical perspective, I worry when we try to legislate too much of the procedure and take out somebody's ability to exercise independent judgment. I think we do a pretty good job hiring the right people. I want to make sure that they're allowed the latitude to exercise I want to make sure people can think and not necessarily have to go black and white. I want to give them a little bit of leeway. I don't want it so wide that they can go contrary to what the intent is, but I don't want it so narrowly confined that that they don't really have a purpose there. Hopefully that makes sense. I'll skip anything else on that first section, then drop to these property damage claims. Again, we're talking about actual receipts or invoices for the cost to repair, restore, or replace damaged property or 3 bids. The problem I see with this is what happens to the person who ends up with 6 to 7 feet of water in their basement and has lost wedding photos and all sorts of keepsakes that have a street value of 0. If you were to go to court, you could argue that there's a sentimental value and they could be potentially receive some sort of remuneration for that. We've eliminated all of that possibility from this and said, nope, only those things that have a dollar value. And again, I don't think that was the intent. That flooding can be very difficult, and mentally it's not an easy thing. And I worry that if we're focused just on the dollar value or the replacement value for some of those things, we might be missing portions and leave people feeling worse off than when they started. I do like that we have the option for bids to be involved in that as well for the replacement, which is appreciated. However, I don't necessarily like the follow-up section that says if you don't actually do it within 60 days, that money goes back. I could picture somebody's home flooding and them saying, okay, well, I'm done, I'm going to move, I don't want to deal with this again. So they're going to sell their house, put their house up on the market, take it for a lower price. If they're not actually going to get the work done, they're not able to get that compensation, where I think it would be due to them regardless. The damage happened. Whether they make the replacement or not, I think is their decision, and we shouldn't necessarily force them. If they can substantiate the dollar value associated with those things that have a dollar value, then I'd like to see it compensated. Number 3, payment for approved remediation effort. I already hit on this, pointing out section B where it says it goes to Public Works and Public Works makes the determination. Again, I think that should be with the city clerk to receive it. And I can understand Public Works weighing in on there.
And one clarification there as far as the reasoning. The way approved remediation efforts is defined is to require the effort to actually mitigate or prevent future flooding so that the money doesn't just go to waste. And the only folks we have on staff that would be capable of determining that would be the engineering folks. So that's why it initially went there.
I totally agree, but the claim should still go to the city clerk to be filed, and then the city clerk can reach out and send a copy over to Public Works, and Public Works can get involved. And I'm fine with them being involved to make sure that the efforts will be fruitful. One of the things that's on here, or that's missing from this, I know we've got one person who, in their remediation efforts, decided, okay, I don't want to have a below-grade driveway, so the garage I have is going to be walled off, driveway's going to come out, I'm going to put in fill. They have to obtain building permits. I would like to see a section in here that either waives and or refunds building permit fees that are paid for a remediation effort that's approved by the Public Works Department. I don't think we should count that against them.
And that actually is in the ordinance. There's state law that somewhat inhibits the ability to waive. It's in the definitions. So approved remediation efforts, as well as the substantiated property damage, repairing your basement with drywall or those sorts of things, could require building permits as well. So those would be covered expenses within.
Can you tell me where in the definition that was covered? Because I did not see that.
Yeah, in definition 9-8-2, it's in D and G.
So this jumps, the clean version starts with 5.
It's true, but it counts against the 2,000.
Yeah, so it's in there, but it counts against the 10,000. We
Correct.
want to exclude that, so the cost of our fees aren't there, or have a separate line saying the fees will be refunded and that will not be applied to the total 10,000.
And I looked at, there's state law that addresses waiving of fees, and there's also council policy that addresses that, and I can look into it some more. I'm not sure that's something that can legally be accomplished.
Okay, I very much like to have conversations. We talked about that one a couple of times, and that's the first that I'd heard. I know for impact fees we can't, but building permit fees, I mean, if that's just a matter of adding a separate line on our fee schedule of saying flood remediation permit fee 0, I mean, having a separate type of fee or something like that that we don't charge for, then...
And that, yeah, I agree, that would be different than a waiver. Yeah, so...
But the overall idea, if somebody's going through the hoops to retrofit their house, I don't want them to have the building fees seem as a permit, or the permit fees seem as a barrier to them. And then the last, there's also a section in here that talks about for remediation efforts, it'll be based upon the lowest of 3 bids, to have the approved remediation effort completed. I'd like to add the words responsive bid to that. But I'd also be curious, who is picking the bids, and can I go to my brother and have him give me a $12,000 bid, my other brother and get a $13,000 bid, and my mom and get an $11,000 bid? Who picks the bids and the bidders and determines which is valid? And then section, the appeals process, the appeal rights, section E, very last sentence. The appeal will be placed on the agenda for the next regularly scheduled council meeting for consideration. Just a little bit of clarity, because if the appeal happens on a Tuesday night, the next regularly scheduled council meeting would be Wednesday, but we're too late to agendize that, so just a little verbiage to clean that one up. And then with the appeal board, want some clarification. This is jumping up to B as in Bravo. The appeal board consists of the Director of Human Resources and Risk Management, the city manager, and a council member other than the applicant's own district council member. Does that prohibit the at-large or mayor from being there? Or if you happen to live next door to the mayor's at-large, so he's not technically representing District 1, could he sit on the appeal board for somebody in District 1? So just a little additional verbiage around that. But I'm obviously not ready to approve this. I also don't want to deny it and say, let's throw it out. So I'm not in favor of either recommended motion. But those were my thoughts. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. Can we have Councilman McConaughey go over those one more time? Thank you for going first. That will make mine much shorter. And several of the things you brought up, I was going to bring up. However, the one about the advance payment, I'm okay with advance payment. I think some of the wordage on that is lengthy, maybe could be shortened. But while we're on the appeal rights, since you brought that one up last, that's one I want to talk about as well. As you mentioned, the at-large, if you're mayor or an at-large person happens to live in the same street or something, is that a problem? In my opinion, I don't think that is a problem. I don't think it's a problem. I know they brought it up before. If you're in that district, that person, so you know that person, that would be better in my mind instead of worse. You understand this person, you understand the circumstances, you understand the situation. Hopefully, we know a lot of our constituents and we have relationships with them. If we have a relationship with them, does that mean we should be pulled off of there? So we shouldn't have a relationship with our constituents, so we can't help them? So I would like to see that totally gone. Right to the word member, all that gone, so any council member can be on that. And then the council member can choose whether he should remove himself from that or not, if or there's some circumstances that he sees fit, or another member may remove him for that purpose. I'm glad you changed those 3s to 10s. Personally, I'd like to see it even bigger, like a 30, because I think having that, we give ourselves 30 days. Why don't we give them 30 days, I say to myself. And then the last one that I want to bring up, and the mayor addressed this on the definition, as I look at that definition, it gives me the 3 things that fit the stormwater runoff event. My question is, if they only have 2 of those 3 things that it causes the flood, does that not count? Because it looks like it has an and in there. Does it have to have all 3?
The and is intentional, yes. Without the and, it does not define the specific event that this program was originally intended to address. So the and is necessary unless the intention is to broaden the scope of the project.
So if they get flooded by 2 of those 3 items, they would not be...
Correct, and they all work together. You're not going to have the backflow without a stormwater reaching capacity first. And you're not going to have the flooding from the backflow without the first 2 events happening. So they all really are one event. It just explains the course of the events, how they build upon each other to result in water in a basement.
So if there were some debris that got caught in there and caused damming effect and didn't ever get to the backflow and came a different route and they got flooded because of that, they would not be liable then. We would not be able to help them out.
The way this is drafted, of my understanding of the history and intent of the program, that would not be covered. You're correct.
I would like to see that changed. I think if it was caused due to a fault not of theirs, then we should be able to care for them. So those are my suggestions. And I agree with Councilman McConaughey. I don't want to say yay or nay at this point. I'd like to see some changes and then bring it back to us so we can make a decision. And thank you for all the work you did. I know that was a great deal of work because I looked all the lined out pieces, and there was very little that carried over onto the new part. It's all new ordinance. So thank you for your work.
No problem.
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not going to go over what Councilmember McConaughey or Councilmember Burton. I'm supportive of the changes, and I would just rehash what they've already said. However, I want to look at it operationally, philosophically, from kind of a little bit higher level, and I might have a couple questions for some staff members. Number one, Mr. Bricky, is our risk manager, does he have time to manage this element?
He does.
Okay, so just from a philosophical, Councilmember McConaughey talked about, Public Works does one part and risk manager does one part. I think from the resident service, customer service standpoint, I think everybody should give their application, which has the 3 items on it: remediation, property, and
cleanup costs.
Cleanup. On one application, it goes to the clerk where it's stamped, and it goes to risk manager, and the risk manager then deals with Public Works. And so there's somebody that the resident can talk to, a single point of contact, and that single point of contact works with the different departments in the city, which is what we would typically do. And I think that's what an insurance company does. An insurance company, when I have an accident in my car, which thankfully doesn't happen very often, knock on wood, I have a single point of contact, my claims adjuster. And that's the only person I talk to. I don't have to talk to the other insurance company. I don't have to talk to the body shop. I talk to one person, and I'm able to solve that. So I think having our risk manager be the claims adjuster on this program would be beneficial. But the other thing that ties into this is I don't want us to perpetuate prior problems, prior issues. So I don't know, and Scott, maybe you can help me on this one. I know we've had one claim that was a negative sloped property, and do we still, control's not the right word, but do we still permit builders to build negative slope driveways, negative slope properties so that they can collect water wrongly?
To answer your question, we don't have any ordinance prohibiting it.
it's just simply not popular anymore. I haven't seen any in the, well, 10 years plus that I've worked here. So it's just that that particular home style has gone out of service, and we just don't see it.
So like the one that we just recently dealt with the Mendels, which is a negative slope driveway and negative slope property, we're not currently seeing those come in, but we don't have an ordinance that says you can't build a negative slope.
Unless engineering standards speak otherwise, but there's nothing in the zoning ordinance that would prohibit it.
Okay, thank you. And then?
David Murphy has a comment regarding that.
David.
The quick comment on that is the lot grading plans prevents that. And that is an engineering standard that we review inside every subdivision. So lot grading standards would preclude any negative slopes going towards a home 10 feet out.
Okay, and that's measured through the inspection process?
Through the review process of the subdivision.
Okay. And then, again, the 30,000 foot, you saw, not so much what you've done, but like with parks. When Councilmember Lamb and I went and visited Dora Lee Park on Bingham View Drive, it appears to me, and I didn't take my level, I don't know how to measure it outside of a 3-foot level, but it appeared that the outlet that allows the storm drain to go into Dora Lee Park seemed to be higher than the park, or it didn't look like it would allow water to drain into the park. And so I don't know. So if we're doing this, someday I would like to see this ordinance go away by solving storm drains, solving backflow, solving water getting into the proper detention basins, those kind of things, so that we're not impacting our residents' property. But how does the city know that the water flows downhill in the park?
A little background, that's mostly a stormwater issue, but they have been going into some of our parks and trying to collect. The sediment's been building up on a lot of them and crowning them and then creating low spots to our parks. So it creates issues for the parks as far as keeping them aesthetically pleasing because they do have those low spots. But Stormwater Division has been picking certain parks and going through and kind of grubbing those areas out and then trying to adjust the grade to them. But I will bring the attention to them on Dora Lee and have them look at that.
And then does our stormwater plan have a standard on how often we vacuum the storm drains from debris? Twice a year, every one, or 3 times a year? Sweep streets?
I ought to refer that one probably over to
standard.
Dave.
Okay.
As far as active maintenance on every outlet, on every park, or every storm drain detention basin, they should be visited at least once a year, if not every 3 months. Do we have enough equipment to do that right now and enough Vector trucks to do that? We have one that does that, but we probably should look at having 2 to do that in the storm drain system. That is the ultimate projection right now, to have 2. So we're not quite there yet, but we're going to get there in a couple of years.
Okay.
That's what's going on.
I haven't gone into a storm drain, but I have looked in storm drains, several of them, and taken pictures. But I'm not ready to approve this yet, but I appreciate all the work that you've put into it. I think this is a great start. I would like it to be done more administratively until we get to the appeals and the final appeal with City Council or however that pans out. But I'd like to be more customer service friendly, just single point of contact, in addition to what Councilmember McConaughey and Councilmember Burton said. I'm very appreciative that we're allowing bids. I do think we need to say something that's a responsive, somebody who's licensed to do that contract. There's things that they ought to have in repairing their home. Licensed contractors or I can't take my car to Al's Body Shop, who doesn't really work on cars, but he calls it that, to get my insurance company to pay him to fix my car. It's got to be somebody that is qualified, just like we would do with roads or buildings, something along those lines. So I do look at that. But anyway, that's all I have. Thank you for the time, Mayor.
Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. Having not been on the council when this ordinance, when the original storm drain slush fund was approved, I have a couple of questions, and that is, and I use the term with all affection possible, what happens with other liability issues from the city? So let's just say we have a sewer line that's got roots running through it, and somehow our TV truck missed it, whatever it might be, and all of a sudden somebody's got 6 inches of sewage in their basement. Something happens and something goes wrong. Or the fire hydrant issue that was brought up, floods somebody's basement. Something that we knew was a potential problem but didn't think it would ever really happen, or we discover a design flaw after it does happen and that should have been figured out before. We don't have any ordinances in place except for stormwater. So what happens if, let's just take the sewage one. I'm sure I could, with enough time, I'd probably come up with 100 hypotheticals. Let's just take the sewage example. If a sewer backs up, I can't apply for $30,000 in remediation or recuperation. So
Correct. Specific to the sewage example and tree roots, that would happen within the property line of the property owner, so we would have no liability. Generally speaking, most of the issues, I imagine your hypotheticals you're contemplating, we would have governmental immunity from, so the city would have no liability. The city has governmental immunity from flooding due to stormwater. So as a matter of law, the city is not legally liable, nor could it be held liable in court for any of the flooding that is contemplated in this program. This is somewhat of a skirt around governmental immunity to provide something that the city is not legally liable to provide.
Right. I appreciate that, and that's kind of what I figured was the case. And even if governmental immunity wasn't a thing, somebody would go to court, file a lawsuit, and try and prove their case, right, a civil suit of some kind, and we'd settle or we wouldn't, and we'd fight it and we wouldn't, whatever. That kind of thing would happen. I'm very scared about slippery slopes. What door are we opening here? Well, of course, it was opened 6 years ago or 5 years ago, whatever this was when this was originally passed. But so I'm nervous about that, and I'm also nervous about whether it's the right thing to be doing as a city. It makes us feel good, right? Oh, we can help them out. We as a council, we as a city staff, we can help them out because we have the money in our budget. It's not our money. It's not my money. It's the taxpayers' money. And should we be collecting, let's just take it down to its very basic root. If something like this happened, we said, yeah, you deserve $30,000. There's 40,000 homes in the city. Should we go to each house, knock on the door and collect our 75 cents and say, yeah, this is going to that guy down the street and around the corner and up the hill whose house flooded. You owe me 75 cents to go to him. Is that proper? Is that something that we should be doing as a governmental body? Councilmember Anderson said he'd like to see this go away someday. I'd like to see it go away today. I don't think this is the proper a proper thing for us to be doing. I fully support a citizen's right, and now this is state law, right? The governmental immunity is a state law. But I fully support a citizen's right to come after us for money if we screw up. That's fine. But go through the courts, go about it legally, go through the process. Let's not write an assumption of liability into our code. That bothers me. So I'll step off my soapbox and turn it over.
Councilmember Whitelock.
So Zach kind of just expressed many of my feelings, so thank you. So I'm not in favor of expanding this in any way. Tonight I probably would have just voted yes, but with all the changes that seem like we're expanding and making it, I don't know, it worries me because of exactly what Councilmember Jacob said, a slippery slope. I don't know where you draw the line. And so if he made a motion, I'd support it to get rid of it. So I appreciate all the work you've put into it. I definitely don't want to expand it. So anything that expands it is definitely a no for me.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. First up, I very much take exception with referring to this as a slush fund. If you Google the term slush fund, a reserve of money used for illicit purposes, especially political bribery. That is not what this is for. If you could have been there to see what happened with the flooding, you would have a very different perspective. So I very strongly oppose that characterization of what this fund is. What's happened to that neighborhood over the years as there has been additional build out, the stormwater system was insufficient. We saw these homes that were built late 60s, early 70s. We saw Jordan Landing come in. We had additional runoff that was put into the system. We saw a lot of additional development over outside of the city that was with the county. Much of the stormwater system is kind of inherited from the county, and it was not designed in such a way to handle the volume of water that was going down there. From a citizen's perspective, my expectation is that if the government has undertaken to provide a system to divert the water away from my home, and now that system is, instead of diverting it away from my home, it's injecting somebody else's water into my home, something is wrong. And while there may be governmental immunity, the right thing to do, at least in the perspective of the prior council, is try to make that person whole. That person did not put in the stormwater system. They did not cause the deficiencies in the system. They're receiving the runoff from somebody else that never should have been there in the first place. So that's what the intention of this was. It seems like the right thing to do. If our system has a shortcoming, we may not be required by law to have some sort of financial recompense to it, but everybody felt like it was the right thing to do. And that's how this came about. I agree that there are some changes that could be made, but I'll leave it there. Thank you, Mayor.
I'd like to make a motion that this come back at a later date after this has been revised. We have a motion and a second. Discussion to the motion. Councilmember Anderson.
Can we set a date as part of that motion, whether it be 2 weeks or 4 weeks, a date of a council meeting so that it's not left just sitting on a table?
How much time would you like?
I'd like some time to speak with some of the council members, make sure I understand their comments. Second meeting next month would be more than sufficient amount of time.
24th of April, so I'll amend my motion that it come back on the 24th of April. Second stands.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, let's vote.
You can choose to have roll call. You don't necessarily, but we can choose.
Let's do it.
Okay. Councilmember Anderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob?
Yes.
Mayor Riding?
Yes.
Councilmember Lamb?
Yes.
Councilmember Burton?
Yes.
Councilmember Whitelock?
Yes.
Councilmember McConaughey? Vote passes 7 in favor.
Business item 8D, discussion of possible action regarding a plan for attendance at the International Conference of Shopping Centers, ICSC, in May 2018. Scott Langford.
I'm going to tee this up rather because while Scott is not the direct supervisor of those folks who work in economic development, I do supervise them. Paul Coates has been sick since last Thursday. He has walking pneumonia. He said he would come in and present, and I asked him not to, that none of us wanted to get sick. And he's been to the doctor's office, I think, 3 times in the last 4 days or something. It's miserable. As a result, I did ask Jeremy if he could present. Jeremy said, yeah, I suppose I can tee it up. But I think the reality is, if you want to hear from the person who drafted the staff report, That's Paul Coates. So if you want to discuss it, I can sort of explain some of the rationale, because I did sit down with Paul once he'd written it. You can see I've signed it. There's some information there that maybe he needs to explain how he came to a percentage there at the last concluding paragraph. But if you would prefer to have this discussion with Paul present, it would probably have to be on April 11th. Otherwise, I can try to stand in and explain the rationale.
Why don't you go ahead?
I'm
Go
sorry?
ahead. You go ahead and explain if the best you can.
Paul's perception of the events that take place in Las Vegas at this event are best accomplished if you have already previously identified areas and have partnerships prearranged, so that when the meetings take place, they're generally done in literally a day. And in fact, his perception is I would fly down in the morning, have 2 or 3 of these meetings, and then leave that night. And that's how he came to the conclusion of the 10%. He also indicated, since we do know already what the land or areas are in question, we also know the developers. I don't know what partnering additionally accomplishes this year. So that's why he said what he did in the report.
Thank you. Questions, and we'll start with Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. I would prefer hearing Paul's report from Paul. I'm sorry that he's not able to be here with us today and cannot report on that. So I would recommend that we postpone this vote until next council meeting, when we can have that report from Mr. Coates himself.
Councilmember Lamb.
Thank you, Mayor. As most of you know, I was really for this in the last meeting when we discussed going down there, but after reading the report that has been presented to us, I would not be in favor of us going now, because it sounds like either, number one, we're not ready to go down, or number two, we don't have the context to go down there and spend our time. I'm new to the council. I haven't been to these conventions before, and it seems like if we're going to go down there, we should go down there with a purpose. And while we kind of have a half-hearted purpose to go down there to meet people and make amends and do what we need to bring business to West Jordan, from what I'm reading currently, it wouldn't make sense for us to go down there, because we don't really have a great plan to go there right now. But I would encourage our city leaders that are able to, and us as a council, that we do have those plans ready for next year, so that we can go down and, you know, find what's best for West Jordan and bring that to our city. Thank you.
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just looking at the registration, and we've missed the early bird deadline, which would have saved $50 a person. And March 30th is the deadline to register and submit your photo to receive your badge mailed. And April 27th is the deadline to receive advance registration fee. I'm the one who originally made the motion to have a plan to go, and so I would like to hear from Paul, but it's not in the packet as far as what the plan is, you know, who to talk to. But I totally agree with your assessment that it is, or I agree with your assessment, Mr. Bricky, so it's on the minutes, that it's you already have the relationship there. This is just a cause to further have further dialogue with someone who you're already chatting with. That's how I see it. So I'd kind of like to see that plan, but if next meeting to me seems to be the go, no-go meeting, depending on his report.
I think that would be accurate. I can certainly convey your concern about a plan. I know that Paul made contact with a couple entities about whether or not they were actually going down and could partner with them. They put conditions on going down with us that I was not comfortable saying, well, I don't want to put that in writing. I mean, I think we have to be a little more flexible. And of course, those entities want commitments from the city as to what we're willing to give or what we're willing to provide. And under the short time frame we were dealing with, I wasn't comfortable with some of the requests.
No, and I'm grateful for that. I don't want to shut the door. I just want to have a plan, a game plan. If we're trying to recruit retail A, company retail A, then we ought to have a plan to recruit company retail A. And if we're going to recruit company B, then we ought to have a plan to recruit company B. And that plan doesn't have to be incentives. The plan has to simply be, we have this parcel, they've expressed an interest, so now we're going to have more dialogue about seeing if we can close the deal. I also want to just focus, and this is more of a personal comment, I want us to focus not on retail, traditional retail. I want us to focus on retail that's online friendly, I guess is the way to describe it. It's immune from internet sales. I don't see sheetrock on Amazon. I don't see 80-pound bags of concrete on Amazon, just to name a couple. But I would like to see us focus on retail that is not, what's the word I want to use? Web immune, I guess is the best way to describe that. So anyway, those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. Looking at the properties that are listed to be considered, I think we can remove the city center project at this point because of property ownership, and without the school district's commitment to be involved, that at this point that really isn't a consideration. Which leaves us Highlands and Copper Rim. If the developer was engaged as well and on board to join with us there, then maybe, but still I would have concerns about whether that's favoring one developer over another. Why we wouldn't be looking at, say, another shopping center that needs revitalization versus one of these that's being built from the ground up. I also would like to look bigger picture. With Councilmember Anderson was talking, we were on this pretty similar wavelength. Rather than looking for business that's web immune, I'm thinking more destination retail, something where you're going there with the intention to spend a little bit more time, not just quickly grabbing something. Where Mr. Coates says he thinks the chances of success with this and bringing back, seeing some sort of return on our investments that's positive is 10 to 15%. I think that might be a little bit optimistic. I think it would probably realistically be lower than that. I really wouldn't expect to see us get our $5,000 out of it at this point in time. Plus, where we're looking for a head of economic development, we have so many other things that really need to get lined up. I think this takes away, at this point, I think this takes away from the primary focus of the city in spurring economic development. We've got enough projects that are happening right now that are already demanding our attention. I don't want to dilute what we're already doing, what's already in the pipeline with something here that doesn't really have a good chance of becoming something solid. So I would be in favor of denying, so an opposition to supporting. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. As a matter of course, or and I hesitate to use the wrong word, but I'll get to that in a second. Having experience with trade shows and conventions and things in my career, you don't always go down and get the prize on the first trip. Does that make sense? Sometimes you go to a convention 3 or 4 or 5 years in a row before you land the big fish. Does that make sense? You go, you make the connections, you go, you introduce yourself, you go to tell people that, hey, we're a city and we've got land and we've got, projects and blah, 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 whatever it might be. So just as a theory or as a thought to kind of keep in the back of your mind for future reference, you don't, as much as we prefer to say, yes, we're going to go right now and we're going to come back with an ROI of 150% on the $5,000 we spent, and we're going to, that would be great, but it may or may not happen that way. It's one of those relationship things, it's one of those networking things, it's just, it takes time and it takes effort and it takes investment. That said, and I don't know if I'm the only person who's ever used the word over and over again and thought they knew what it means, but didn't know what it means. I thought a slush fund was a savings account or a rainy day fund or something like that. So I apologize. I had no ill intention with using that word. I've even heard it on the news, and I just thought it just meant a bunch of money sitting somewhere. So I didn't know that there was an intention behind it. So I apologize. for any misconstruing that I may have said. Anyway, there's another word that I probably used correctly or incorrectly.
Councilmember Burton.
I was going to make a motion, but since I see Councilmember Anderson has queued up, I will postpone my. Okay. So, in the preface of making my motion, I want to state the purpose of this motion is to let people know West Jordan is alive, we're well, we're healthy, we're open, we desire you to come, and our return, if we don't go, will be 0%. And if our return is 10 or 20 or 50, I don't know. But if we let people know that we are here alive, we want to entertain them and bring more life to West Jordan. We can't do that if we don't ever approach them and talk to them. And the whole purpose isn't this, if we come back with the business, that's great. If we don't, and we just build those relationships and we make it start happening, get those wheels turning. We had this discussion last year and we didn't go, and look what happened. Nothing.
Can you make your motion a little bit shorter than that?
Okay, I will. Okay, I move that we approve resolution. It's not a resolution. Okay, we approve attending the ICSC conference in May of 2018 at Las Vegas.
I'll second, just for fun.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion to the motion. Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. First off, I want to thank Councilmember Jacob for his comments and clarification. Very much appreciate that. That's one of the reasons why I like working with him, too. When there are miscommunications, he's quick to clarify, so thank you. As far as the math on this, I will throw out an alternate way to look at this. If we invest no money, then we lose no money, so it's 100% return or 100% savings. I worry about some of the bigger projects that we have in the pipeline. Granted, it's only a couple of days, but the work leading up to this taken away, knowing some of the projects that are coming down, I worry about a potential negative return if those get put on the back burner and things slip there, where we have multiple actual solid prospects in order to chase something that may or may not happen. So I would be opposed to the motion, although I would be less opposed if there was a motion for maybe 2 people instead of 4. I will also read quickly where he talks about the participation challenges. I'm not too worried about the hotel or the registration, but the big one for me is the meeting schedules. He says, in the past, we've had to start making meeting requests in February to assure that we have a chance of getting our meeting request granted. There's a limited number of available slots with targeted parties, where we're already near April. That's the big one that sticks out to me is, okay, well, how much opportunity do we have to build a relationship or showcase? And I'm not sure we're showcasing the right properties, so I'm still in opposition. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to offer a substitute motion. As much as I think this would be beneficial, my substitute motion is to have Paul Coates give his report at the next council meeting, that we not attend the retail real estate convention and hosted by the International Council of Shopping Centers this year, and based on Paul Coates' comments at the next council meeting, use that as a foundation to set up appointments and be ready for the show in 2019. And that would be my substitute motion.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion, a substitute motion, and a second to the substitute motion. Discussion to that motion. Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. Even if we don't meet with the big players, if we meet with some of the small players there are thousands upon thousands of people there. If we just meet with some small players and make some small progress, I would be pleased. So I would be opposed to that motion. However, I like the second part of the motion. I just don't like the first part.
Seeing no other questions or comments, let's vote on that substitute motion.
Correct. Councilmember Whitelock?
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson?
Yes.
Councilmember McConaughey?
No.
Councilmember Jacob?
No.
Councilmember Lamb?
Yes.
Mayor Riding?
Yes.
Councilmember Burton?
No.
Vote passes 4-3.
Business item 8E, approve resolution 18-56, authorizing the mayor to execute the attached real estate purchase agreement between Urban Chase Property Management, LLC, and the city of West Jordan regarding the Sycamores property, approximately 6.73 acres, located at 7049 West, 7800 South. David Bricky.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. In this particular instance, this was a piece of property that was previously put out to bid. It's taken us 3 extensions. At one point, there was a discovery of a water line that people didn't know about, so we had to adjust for and allow the purchaser to consider, did that change, alter, or make his interest in the property somewhat less. Then after taking a look at it, he had to realign some of the design of his concepts. Needless to say, at the beginning and start of the new year, there was distraction on his part. He got pulled away from finishing this project and got sucked into his other activities. He is done with those activities. I said, we need to move forward. We need to know if you're still interested. And when I gave him a deadline that was very short, he was very accommodating and said yes. So at this point, once we get final approval from you folks, you'll see, again, once the money arrives, we'll put it in that line that's identified for the cultural center. So you'll start seeing some build-up there. So I would like to request your authorization to sell that property.
Councilmember Whitelock.
So when I look at the price per acre, was that then the price per acre however months ago that you started this process? Because it seems kind of low.
It is the price per acre. It was something that was put out to bid 3 times. We were never getting the amount that we thought was fair, so this final third was absolutely what we said was the bare minimum, and the bidding party, winning party came in, bid exactly that amount, won it fair and square.
And this was done, the whole purpose of this is for the Art Center, right? Is that why this piece of property got put up for sale?
That was my understanding. I had a different role back then, but that was my understanding, yes.
Right. And at this point, we've kind of already worked with this guy and said he's got it. Whoever this buyer is, Urban Chase Property Management, we've already worked with them and told them they got it, right? Thank you.
Councilmember Anderson.
I'm going to, since we put in the original purchase agreement, the 3, and we couldn't get it done because of the water line thing, the water line issue, I'm going to move to approve Resolution 1856, authorizing the mayor to execute the attached real estate purchase agreement between Urban Chase Property Management, LLC, and the city of West Jordan.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion to the motion. Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be voting no, as I've been voting no on the sale of this property from the beginning, just to be consistent. The residents of the neighborhood don't want it. They don't want the property sold. They don't want it surplus. And it's my district. These are the people I represent. It's my neighborhood. So I'll be consistently opposed. Thank you.
Can you expound
Councilmember Whitelock.
on why they don't want it sold? What?
Councilmember Jacob.
I can. The arguments that were made several months ago when this was surplus, when initial rezoning was going through, even before it was surplused, is that it is currently part of the Sycamores Open Space Park. Now, when I say park, I don't mean green grass, swing sets, and soccer fields. I mean weeds with maybe a trail through it. It's an open space park. What do we call that? Our unimproved park. So in the eyes of residents, they were hoping that someday there would be grass and soccer fields and maybe a swing set. They said, wow, look, it's part of a city park. However, now it's part of a subdivision. So it's not, the residents just in that neighborhood always were thinking that would either be open space of some kind, whether improved or not. So that's the understanding that I have anyway.
Okay, seeing no more discussion, let's vote.
Councilmember McConaughey?
Aye.
Councilmember Burton?
Yes.
Councilmember Whitelock?
Yes.
Mayor Riding?
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob?
No.
Councilmember Anderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Lamb?
Yes.
Vote passes 6-1 in favor.
Item 9, remarks. Any further remarks this evening? Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. So I wanted to talk a little bit about construction on 70th South. I want to preference my remarks with pointing out that obviously we can't take any action right now because it's not agendized to take action. So rather what I want to do is share a couple thoughts and see if this is something that we want to put on the agenda for our next council meeting. So let me see if I can pull this over real quick. So, yeah, mink farm. Let's talk about that. That'll be more fun. It really does. So we've got the construction going on 70th South. We all saw that last year. And is this done? Is this done? Please tell me it's done. Hold on 2 seconds. No, it's not there. I'm trying to download some pictures of the area, and it's taking forever and then some. Oh, it says it's completed. Hold on just a second. Okay. My apologies. This will just take but a quick moment. 2018 tagged. All right. So what I want to show you is some of the construction that we saw last year on 70 South. Basically what I'm getting to is there's a proposal from the contractor that they might be able to shorten the construction on 70th if we allow for a closure. Now the contract we have says no closures, you maintain traffic flowing both directions. Conversations with the neighborhood out here, the majority seem to be in favor of a closure if it can save time and also result in a better overall product and result in increased safety. That's kind of what I'm getting at. This is right in the section, right about 1925 West. This is looking southbound. You're on the north side of Redwood Road looking south. This is Camelot right here. There's a lot of places like this where they have to put in laterals to go to the various homes that are out there. This is what's causing some of the problem. As you look at where 70 South has been reconstructed west of 2700, west of 2200, we require them to go out, do all their digging, put everything back, and then move on to the next portion. That section of the road is incredibly bumpy. Talking to some folks who, this is outside of staff, so staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but what I've been told is they had issues with soil compaction, getting everything to compact properly. So you'll notice even now there's some settling that's starting to happen below the asphalt, so you're getting a little bit of bumping where we otherwise have like a clean sheet of asphalt. A closure to allow them to do all of that at once would potentially help make sure we get a little bit better product. So that's why I wanted to show this particular picture. Next, this is the same spot. It just gives you some scale of what's going on with the pipes, how much is going on. So you've got a good section of road that's closed off. You've got the old water mains that are out here visible. You've got the new hardware that's about to be put in. You've got crews who are working very, very close to traffic. So there are some potential safety issues with this. Yes, it can be done, but safety is a concern. This is just to show, I just thought this was interesting. I don't like this. We'll go to the next one. And again, this is showing where we're letting traffic kind of juggle back and forth between the north side of the road and the south side of the road. You've got folks who are driving at night going westbound on this road. If you have somebody who's not familiar with the area, who's distracted momentarily looking at their GPS, if you miss and we've had issues where some of these cones have been, or the barricades have been knocked over, you have that happen, and it's really easy for somebody to just drive straight into this. Again, safety is definitely a concern with the construction going on out there. This is on Fargo Road and 2200 West. So this right here is about, what, 2300, 2350, 2400 West, somewhere in there. You can just see how much of a barrier we have between the asphalt and a big gaping chasm. This is a very large diameter pipe of, what, 18 inches, perhaps? 18, 24, somewhere in there. This thing down here is somewhere like 4 to 6 foot diameter, just guessing. Anyway, my point in showing this is that there's a safety concern that I have with leaving the road, with continuing down the same route that we have been without allowing the road closure, for a road closure. If we look at the area in question, this is Redwood Road 70th South, and it's been proposed to close, worst case scenario, all the way from Redwood Road up to about 1925 West. There could be accommodations that are made to allow the neighborhood that lives off Executive. This is their only entrance and exit. So, well, one doesn't, the rest do. So there can be accommodations made to let them in and out. We also have to make accommodations for deliveries behind the strip mall. This neighborhood to the north right here between Running Springs and Heather Way, you'll see that this is a horseshoe that doesn't have any other exit to the left to the northeast or west. Rather, only entrance and exit is off of 70th. So we want to be really careful to make sure that these folks are thought about should we have some sort of closure. As we've been talking with the neighborhood, there's a survey that was done, and I'll get a little bit more into the survey, but of the folks who live in the immediate area of this, of where this construction would be, 17 were in favor of a closure and 6 were opposed. What we saw last year with the construction is you have a lot of folks, you have limited road capacity, 1 lane each way. It makes it very difficult for these folks to get in and out of their driveway. And for the folks who live up in this neighborhood to try and turn even westbound, eastbound is not possible, but westbound is very, very difficult. It might actually make it a little bit easier for these folks to get to and from their residences if there were a closure to be permitted. Anyway, I could go for a while longer. I should stop because, again, I'm reminding myself that we're not actually taking any action tonight. But I think it would be beneficial to discuss the options around a potential closure. The contractor is saying 28 days could allow for up to 12 days to be removed from the construction schedule. Talking with Mr. Murphy, he doesn't think a full 28 days would be necessary, and he thinks it could be much more limited. And there are probably a half dozen different options, not just the one. So I would like to find out if there's support from the council to agendize this for our next city council meeting to talk about benefits and detriments to traffic control for this next portion of 70th South construction.
I would agree with agendizing it. Any other comments on that?
That's a really long way to go, so hopefully there.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm fine with agendizing it. I just want to be, maybe Mr. Murphy can provide some timeline when it's on the agenda that just shows the different construction, because right now we have 70th and Bangerter closed. There's construction work on 90th, and I think we just need to make sure that we're sequencing it as we discuss the different options, so as to not, we have a lot of streets that are torn up. So Not saying no, I can be supportive of it, but I would like to kind of see a sequence of events, because we have a number of roads that are closed. And with Bangerter closed off and this portion closed off, it basically would take 70th South out of the traffic plan for those 28 or less days.
Councilmember Conahee.
Thank you, Mayor. Completely agree. The thing I'm looking at is the construction's going to be happening regardless, and if there's something that we can do to expedite it, make sure we've got a good product. You'll be seeing information from a survey that went out. I want you to pay attention to the comments if you see that survey. Like I said, the majority of the folks who live right in the project area are very much supportive of the closure, but there were some contextual issues with some folks' responses. There was one entity that saw the link for the survey and blasted it out to all their users, but it was captioned, "Should the city allow the contractor to completely shut down 70th South?" So there are a number of those responses saying, "I live off of 13th West and need to get to Heartland Elementary. You can't do that because I have no access to Heartland." You have others who live on 2700 West, need to get to Oker Elementary, and they're saying, "This is the only way I have to get there." It's very evident from the comments that they didn't realize it was just a partial closure. They saw the blurb that went on the email, but didn't read the text and understand that it was one specific area. So anyway, so keep that in mind. But yes, there is going to be construction here regardless. And given the frustrations, I'm wondering if for safety reasons and to finish it more expeditiously, it might be something worth considering. But I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to move to closed session to discuss the character and fitness of an applicant. And then
We
adjourn.
also add the discussion of real property purchase or sale.
And to include the discussion on real property for sale.
And possible litigation.
So just all three?
Oh, and possible litigation. We got all three of them tonight. Oh, sounds like it. We have a motion, but I didn't hear a second. Second.
But
Discussion to that motion.
You're meaning to adjourn from there. Is that
Yes,
part of
we
your
are. We
motion?
are adjourning from there. Let's vote.
Mayor Riding,
Yes.
Councilmember Whitelock,
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson,
Yes.